The text message glowed on my wife's phone screen like a neon sign announcing my humiliation. Can't wait for tonight, baby. Dad's finally seeing you're the real deal, and I'll love you forever. E. My name is Robert Fox, and I'm a biochemist who just discovered that being fluent in Mandarin Chinese might be the only weapon I have left. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I set Linda's phone back on the nightstand exactly where I found it, my hands surprisingly steady for a man whose world had just imploded. 36 years old, and I was still learning new things about betrayal. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Ethan Lowe, my father-in-law's golden boy protégé, the guy who drove a Tesla and wore suits that cost more than my monthly lab salary. Dinner with the Chinese clients will be perfect. Can't wait to celebrate after. I walked to our bedroom window overlooking Beacon Hill, watching morning joggers navigate the cobblestone streets. Linda was already at the museum. Her job as curator at the Boston Fine Arts Center gave her plenty of excuses for late nights and weekend exhibitions. How long had I been the clueless husband? How long had they been laughing at quiet, awkward Robert who spoke more to his test tubes than to people? The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 4 years in graduate school studying biochemistry at MIT, including 2 semesters in Beijing perfecting my Mandarin for international research collaborations. Linda knew this, of course, but apparently forgot to mention it to her father and her lover. Mr. Peterson, CEO of Peterson Manufacturing, treated me like furniture at family dinners. Present, functional, but hardly worth noticing. My phone rang. "Robert, it's Harold Peterson." My father-in-law's voice carried that familiar tone of barely concealed condescension. "I need you at dinner tonight. Important Chinese clients, and Linda suggested you join us. 7 o'clock at the Fairmont." "Of course, Mr. Peterson. I'll be there." "Good. And Robert, try to look presentable. These clients are worth millions." The line went silent. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Thinning brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the pale complexion of someone who spent too much time under fluorescent lab lights. Not exactly the image of a corporate shark, but appearances could be deceiving. I called my sister Maggie at the bar where she worked in Southie. "Maggie, I need a favor. Can you recommend a good private investigator?" "Jesus, Bobby, what's going on? You sound terrible." "Just need someone discreet, someone good with cameras." 2 hours later, I met Tommy Ricci at a coffee shop in the North End. He was exactly what I expected from Maggie's recommendation. Weathered face, cheap suit, eyes that had seen too much. "Your wife stepping out?" he asked without preamble. "I think so. I need proof." 500 retainer, 150 a day plus expenses. Photos, video, financial records if you want them. How deep you want me to dig? Deep enough to bury them. That evening, I dressed carefully. My best suit, the one Linda bought me for her museum galas. She was already at the restaurant when I arrived, stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than my car payment. Her auburn hair was pulled back elegantly, and she wore the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 5th anniversary. "Robert, you made it," she said, kissing my cheek with lips that had been kissing another man. "Dad and Ethan are already here with Mr. Wang." The Fairmont's restaurant was all mahogany and crystal, the kind of place where conversations happened in hushed tones and deals were sealed with handshakes worth millions. Mr. Peterson sat at the head of the table like a king holding court, his silver hair perfectly styled, his Armani suit immaculate. At 62, he still commanded every room he entered. Ethan Lowe sat to his right, and I had to admit the bastard was handsome. Square jaw, perfect teeth, the kind of confident smile that probably made women weak in the knees, including my wife, apparently. He wore a navy suit that fit like it was tailored specifically for his gym-sculpted frame. "Robert," Mr. Peterson said without standing, "you know Ethan, my project manager, and this is Mr. Wang, our potential partner from Shanghai." Mr. Wang was a distinguished man in his 50s, wearing an expensive watch and the kind of quiet confidence that came with serious money. He nodded politely as I took my seat across from Linda, directly facing the man who was sleeping with my wife. "Mr. Wang's company is interested in our new water filtration technology," Peterson continued. "Ethan's been handling the negotiations." I smiled and nodded, playing the role of the quiet academic. Linda leaned toward Ethan as he explained the technical specifications, her hand briefly touching his arm. The gesture was subtle, intimate, the kind of unconscious contact between lovers. "The profit margins are extraordinary," Ethan was saying, his voice smooth and confident. "We're looking at a 3-year exclusive licensing deal worth approximately $50 million. Mr. Wang listened politely, occasionally asking questions in accented English. The conversation flowed around me like I was invisible, which was exactly what I wanted. Linda laughed at Ethan's jokes, her eyes bright with admiration. Peterson beamed at his protégé like a proud father. Then Mr. Wang turned to Peterson and said something that made me freeze. In perfect Mandarin, he said, "Your daughter is very beautiful. It's obvious she's in love with this young man. When will you announce their engagement?" Peterson chuckled and replied in equally fluent Mandarin, "Soon, I hope. Robert is a nice enough fellow, but he's not suitable for Linda. Too quiet, too academic. Ethan has real potential. I'm making him VP next quarter, and Linda will divorce Robert after the holidays. Less messy that way." Linda giggled and added in Mandarin, "Robert has no idea. He's so focused on his little experiments. Ethan and I have been together for 8 months now. The closeness is incredible." Ethan grinned and said, "The poor bastard probably thinks we're discussing the weather. He just sits there like a piece of furniture." They all laughed. Mr. Wang looked slightly uncomfortable but smiled politely. I maintained my blank expression, occasionally sipping my wine, playing the part of the oblivious husband who couldn't understand a word. The conversation continued in English, but the damage was done. I knew everything now. The timeline, the plan, the complete contempt they had for me. 8 months of betrayal. 8 months of coming home to a wife who was sleeping with another man, planning a future that didn't include me. As dessert arrived, I made my decision. I stood up slowly, every eye at the table turning to me. In perfect, fluent Mandarin, I addressed Mr. Wang directly. "Mr. Wang, before you sign any agreements, you should know that the financial projections Ethan showed you contain deliberately inflated numbers. The actual profit margins are 30% lower than stated. Also, your potential business partner is sleeping with his boss's married daughter, using company funds for their hotel rooms and gifts. I have documentation if you would like to review it." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Wang's eyes widened in shock. Peterson's face went from confusion to horror as he realized I'd understood every word of their earlier conversation. Linda's mouth fell open, and Ethan looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "Furthermore," I continued in Mandarin, "Mrs. Peterson owns 40% of the company's stock and has no idea about the affair or the financial irregularities. She's also very traditional about family honor. I thought you should know before committing to any partnerships." Mr. Wang stood up immediately, his face a mask of professional politeness. "Thank you for the information, Mr. Fox. I believe we need to reconsider this arrangement." He bowed slightly and walked out of the restaurant without another word. Peterson found his voice first. "What the hell did you just say to him?" I switched back to English, my voice calm and steady. "I told him the truth. About the inflated projections, about the affair, about your plans to make Ethan VP while he's screwing your daughter with company money." Linda's face had gone white. "Robert, I can explain." 8 months, I said quietly. 8 months of lying to my face, planning my humiliation, spending our money on hotel rooms. Did you really think I was that stupid?" Ethan leaned forward aggressively. "Now listen here, you little—" "No, you listen," I interrupted, my voice still calm but with an edge that made him sit back. "You just lost a $50 million deal because you couldn't keep it in your pants. How do you think the board will react when they find out why?" I pulled out my phone and showed them the screenshot of Linda's text messages I'd taken that morning. "I've got months of these. Hotel receipts paid for with the company credit card. Photos from your romantic weekend in the Hamptons. All documented, all ready to be shared with Mrs. Peterson, the board of directors, and anyone else who might be interested." Peterson's voice was shaking with rage. "You can't do this. I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you never work in this city again." "With what influence?" I asked. "You just lost your biggest client because your future son-in-law is an idiot and your daughter is a cheating whore. How much credibility do you think you have left?" Linda slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the restaurant as other diners turned to stare. "How dare you speak to me like that?" I touched my cheek where her hand had left a red mark. "How dare I? How dare you? 5 years of marriage, Linda. 5 years of me coming home every night, trusting you, loving you, while you were planning to throw me away like garbage." I stood up and dropped a $100 bill on the table. "Dinner's on me. Consider it a going-away present." As I walked toward the exit, I heard Ethan call out, "This isn't over, Fox." I turned back with a smile that felt foreign on my face. "You're absolutely right. It's just getting started." The next morning, Tommy Ricci called with the first batch of photos. Linda and Ethan at the Ritz-Carlton, holding hands as they entered the elevator. Linda and Ethan at a jewelry store, him buying her a bracelet that I'd never seen. Linda and Ethan at his apartment building, her leaving the next morning in the same dress she'd worn to her late museum meeting. "There's more," Tommy said. Financial records show he's been using the company credit card for personal expenses, hotels, restaurants, gifts. We're talking about $20,000 in fraudulent charges over the past 6 months. Send everything to this email address, I said, giving him Mrs. Peterson's personal contact information. Harold's wife, Margaret, controlled 40% of Peterson Manufacturing and had never liked Linda. She was old Boston money, the kind of woman who valued reputation above everything else. You sure about this? Tommy asked. Once this gets out, there's no putting it back in the bottle. I'm sure. That afternoon, I moved out of the Beacon Hill brownstone Linda and I had shared, taking only my clothes and personal items. I left a single post-it note on the refrigerator. Enjoy your new life with Ethan. Hope it was worth it. I rented a small apartment in Cambridge, close to my lab at the biotech company where I worked. It was a studio, barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. No lies, no betrayal, just silence and the smell of old books. Linda called that evening, her voice shaking. Robert, we need to talk. This is all a misunderstanding. Which part was the misunderstanding? The 8 months of adultery or the part where you called me furniture in Mandarin? You don't understand. Ethan and I, it just happened. We never meant to hurt you. You planned to divorce me after the holidays to make it less messy. That sounds pretty intentional to me. Please, Robert, can't we work this out? I made a mistake, but I still love you. You love me? You told a stranger that the closeness with your boyfriend was incredible. You laughed when he called me a poor bastard. That's not love, Linda. That's contempt. I hung up and turned off my phone. The next morning, Margaret Peterson called my lab directly. Her voice was ice cold and furious. Mr. Fox, I received some very disturbing photographs and financial documents. I need to speak with you immediately. We met at her Lewisburg Square mansion, a 4-story brick monument to old Boston wealth. Margaret Peterson was a formidable woman, silver hair pulled back severely, sharp blue eyes, and the kind of posture that came from generations of breeding and money. These photos are quite clear, she said, spreading Tommy's evidence across her mahogany desk. My husband's employee has been stealing from the company to fund an affair with that girl he insisted on marrying. She never called Linda by name, I noticed. Always that girl or the museum person. What do you intend to do with this information? She asked. I want them to face consequences for what they've done. Not just to me, but to your company, your family's reputation. Margaret nodded approvingly. Harold has always been too lenient with employees, too trusting. This Lowe person has violated his fiduciary duty and stolen company funds. That's grounds for immediate termination and criminal charges. What about Linda? Margaret's smile was arctic. That girl has embarrassed this family for the last time. Harold may be blinded by sentiment, but I control the purse strings. She'll find herself cut off from all Peterson family resources, including the trust fund that's been supporting her little museum job. 2 days later, the scandal exploded across Boston's business community. Margaret Peterson called an emergency board meeting and presented the evidence of Ethan's financial fraud. Harold tried to defend his protégé, but the numbers were undeniable. $20,000 in stolen company funds, falsified expense reports, and the lost Chinese contract that would have been worth $50 million. Ethan was fired immediately and escorted from the building by security. The local business journal ran a story about the Peterson manufacturing scandal, with photos of Ethan doing his perp walk past the company's front entrance. Linda fared even worse. Margaret Peterson made a few strategic phone calls to the museum's board of directors, mentioning Linda's inappropriate personal conduct and questionable judgment in professional relationships. The Boston Fine Arts Center prided itself on its reputation for integrity and family values. Linda was quietly asked to resign to avoid a more public termination. I was having coffee at a cafe near my lab when I saw Linda for the first time since our confrontation. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail, her expensive clothes replaced by jeans and a wrinkled sweater. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Robert, she said, sliding into the seat across from me without invitation. Please, we need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. You've destroyed my life, my job, my family, everything. Was your revenge really worth all this? I studied her face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse. You destroyed your own life, Linda. I just made sure there were consequences. I made a mistake. People make mistakes. But what you've done is cruel and vindictive. A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk on the way home. What you did was a deliberate betrayal that lasted 8 months. You planned to humiliate me, divorce me, and throw me away like garbage. The only thing I did was make sure you faced the same humiliation you were planning for me. Tears started running down her cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. I know I hurt you, but I never meant for it to go this far. You meant for it to go exactly this far. You just thought you'd be the one walking away with everything while I was left with nothing. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Please, Robert. I'll do anything. I'll cut all contact with Ethan. We can go to counseling. I'll sign a prenup, whatever you want. I pulled my hand away gently. It's too late for that. You made your choice 8 months ago. Now you have to live with the consequences. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I have no job, no money, no family support. I don't know, Linda. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to betray your marriage for a man who's now unemployed and facing criminal charges. She stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. You've changed. You're not the man I married. You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. The man you married would have quietly accepted your betrayal and walked away with nothing. But that man passed in a restaurant when he heard his wife describe their private life to strangers in a foreign language. I stood up and left her sitting alone at the table, crying into her coffee. That evening, Ethan showed up at my apartment building. I was coming back from the lab when I saw him waiting by the entrance, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Fox!" he called out as I approached the door. "We need to talk." "I don't think so." Oh, he grabbed my arm as I tried to walk past him. "You destroyed my career, you bastard. 5 years of work, gone because of your jealousy." I looked down at his hand on my arm until he released it. "Your career was destroyed because you stole company money to fund your affair. I just made sure the right people found out about it. Linda loves me. We were going to be together anyway. You were just delaying the inevitable." "Maybe, but now you're both unemployed and facing fraud charges. How's that working out for your relationship?" His face flushed red with anger. "You think you're so smart, don't you? The quiet little scientist who speaks Chinese. Well, let me tell you something. This isn't over. I know people in this city. I can make your life very difficult." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "What people? You were fired for embezzlement. Your mentor won't return your calls. Your girlfriend has no money and no job. Exactly what kind of influence do you think you have left? I'll find a way to make you pay for this." "You already did pay for it. $20,000 in company funds, to be exact. That's what this revenge cost. And you picked up the tab." He took a step closer, trying to intimidate me with his size and gym-built physique. "You're going to regret this, Fox. I promise you that." I looked up at him calmly. "The only thing I regret is not finding out about your affair sooner. I could have saved myself months of living with a liar." He raised his fist like he was going to hit me, then seemed to think better of it. "This isn't finished," he said, backing away. "Yes, it is," I replied, and went inside. But Ethan was right about one thing. It wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, I was working late in my lab when I heard someone trying to break into my apartment upstairs. I called the police and waited in my car across the street until they arrived. They caught Ethan red-handed, trying to jimmy the lock on my front door. He was arrested for attempted breaking and entering, which violated the terms of his bail on the embezzlement charges. His lawyer managed to get him released, but the judge imposed stricter conditions and ordered him to stay away from me. The next morning, Linda called me at work. "Robert, you have to drop the charges against Ethan. This has gone too far." I didn't press charges. He was caught trying to break into my apartment. The police arrested him. He was desperate. You've destroyed both our lives. Can't you show some mercy? Where was your mercy when you were planning to humiliate me? Where was Ethan's mercy when he was stealing company money? We made mistakes, but we're not criminals. Ethan is literally a criminal. He stole $20,000 and tried to break into my home. Those are crimes, Linda. You're enjoying this, aren't you? You're enjoying watching us suffer. I thought about that question seriously. Was I enjoying their suffering? I'm enjoying justice, I said finally. I'm enjoying watching people face consequences for their actions. If that looks like suffering to you, maybe you should have made better choices. The final confrontation came 3 weeks later at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts annual gala. I hadn't planned to attend, but my company had bought a table as part of a corporate sponsorship, and my boss insisted I represent the science department. The museum was transformed for the evening. Elegant lighting, ice sculptures, servers in white jackets carrying champagne and canapes. Boston's cultural elite mingled in their finest evening wear, discussing art and charity with equal passion. I was standing near the contemporary art exhibit when I saw them, Linda and Ethan, dressed in what were probably their last expensive clothes, trying to work the room like they still belonged. Linda wore a red dress I'd never seen before, probably borrowed or bought on credit. Ethan wore his navy suit, the same one from our disastrous dinner. They were talking to Dr. Harrison, the museum's director, when Linda spotted me across the room. I saw her whisper something to Ethan, and they both looked in my direction with expressions of pure hatred. I was debating whether to leave early when they approached me directly, Ethan leading the way with Linda close behind. Well, well, Ethan said loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. Look who decided to show his face in polite society. Ethan, Linda. I nodded politely, keeping my voice calm and professional. You must be so proud of yourself, Linda said, her voice dripping with venom. Destroying people's lives, ruining careers. Is this how you get your kicks now? Several people had turned to watch our conversation, sensing drama. I recognized some faces from previous galas. Museum board members, wealthy donors, the kind of people who thrived on gossip and scandal. I'm not sure what you mean, I said evenly. I've been focused on my work. Your work, Ethan laughed bitterly. Playing with test tubes while real men build businesses and make deals. No wonder Linda needed a real relationship. The crowd around us was growing larger, drawn by the obvious tension. I could see phones being discreetly pulled out, ready to capture whatever happened next. A real relationship? I asked, my voice still calm. Is that what you call stealing company money to pay for hotel rooms? Is that what you call planning to divorce someone's husband behind his back? Linda's face flushed red. That's not how it happened, and you know it. Actually, I know exactly how it happened. I heard you describe it in detail, in Mandarin, to a room full of strangers. You called the closeness incredible, and me a poor bastard. Very romantic. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I could see recognition dawning on several faces as they connected our names to the recent scandal in the business pages. You had no right to spy on us, Ethan said, his voice rising. No right to destroy what Linda and I had together. What you had together was built on lies and stolen money. $20,000 in company funds, to be exact. I didn't destroy it. I just made sure everyone knew what it really was. You sanctimonious little prick, Ethan snarled, stepping closer. You think you're better than us because you caught us. You're nothing. You've always been nothing. A boring little lab rat who couldn't satisfy his own wife. The crowd gasped at the crudeness of his attack. This was supposed to be a refined cultural event, not a Jerry Springer episode. I smiled calmly. You're right, Ethan. I couldn't satisfy my wife. But then again, I wasn't using embezzled money to do it. That does tend to limit one's options. How dare you? Linda shouted, raising her hand to slap me again. This time I caught her wrist gently but firmly. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Linda. We have an audience now, and I don't think these people would appreciate seeing you assault someone at a charity gala. She jerked her hand away, looking around at the circle of faces watching our drama unfold. You've humiliated us enough. When is this going to end? It ended the moment you decided to betray your marriage. Everything that's happened since then has just been the natural consequences of your choices. Dr. Harrison finally intervened, approaching our group with museum security close behind. I think perhaps this conversation should continue elsewhere, he said diplomatically. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I think this conversation is over, but since we have such a distinguished audience, maybe they'd like to see what a real relationship looks like. I opened the photo gallery on my phone and held it up so the crowd could see the pictures Tommy had taken. Linda and Ethan entering hotel rooms, kissing in restaurant booths, shopping for jewelry with company credit cards. These photos were taken over the past 8 months, I announced to the crowd. While Linda was married to me, she was conducting an affair with Ethan Lowe, who was stealing money from his employer to fund their relationship. They planned to wait until after the holidays to divorce me to make it less messy, as they put it. The crowd murmured in shock and disapproval. In Boston's refined social circles, this kind of behavior was beyond scandalous. It was vulgar. When they thought I couldn't understand them, they discussed their affair in Mandarin, laughing about my ignorance and planning my humiliation. They called me furniture, a poor bastard who was too stupid to realize what was happening. Linda was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Please stop, she whispered. The only reason their plan failed, I continued, was because they didn't bother to learn that their piece of furniture happened to be fluent in Mandarin Chinese. When they revealed their affair and their embezzlement to a potential business partner, thinking I couldn't understand, I made sure the truth came out. Ethan grabbed Linda's arm. We're leaving, he said, trying to push through the crowd. Yes, you are, Dr. Harrison said firmly. Security will escort you out, and don't bother coming back. As museum security led them toward the exit, I heard Linda call back desperately. Robert, please, this isn't who you are. I looked at her one last time. This woman I'd loved and trusted for 5 years. This woman who'd planned to throw me away like garbage. You're right, Linda. This isn't who I was, but it's exactly who you made me become. The crowd parted as they were escorted out, and I could hear whispered conversations starting up around me. By tomorrow, the story would be all over Boston's social media, another cautionary tale about infidelity and embezzlement in high society. Dr. Harrison approached me as the excitement faded down. "Mr. Fox, I apologize for that unpleasant scene. I had no idea they would be attending tonight." "It's not your fault, Dr. Harrison. Some people have trouble accepting responsibility for their actions." "Indeed. I hope this hasn't ruined your evening." I looked around at the elegant museum, the beautiful art, the distinguished guests who were now looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. "Actually," I said, "I think my evening just got a lot better." 3 months later, I received a letter from Linda's attorney. She was filing for divorce and wanted to negotiate a settlement. I forwarded the letter to my own lawyer with a note. "Give her nothing. She already took everything she's going to get from me." Ethan was eventually sentenced to 2 years probation and ordered to pay full restitution for the embezzled funds. He left Boston and moved back to Ohio, where he took a job selling insurance. Linda moved in with her sister in Portland, where she works as a substitute teacher. I still work at the same biotech lab, still live in my small Cambridge apartment. But I've started dating again, a colleague from MIT who appreciates intelligence over flashy cars and expensive suits. Her name is Sarah, and when I told her my story, she said something that made me laugh. "Good thing you speak Mandarin. Otherwise you might have ended up like one of those clueless husbands in a bad movie." Sometimes I wonder if I went too far, if my revenge was too complete, too devastating. Then I remember sitting in that restaurant, listening to my wife describe her affair to strangers, hearing her laugh as her lover called me a poor bastard, and I know I did exactly what needed to be done. They thought they were so clever, planning my humiliation in a language they assumed I couldn't understand. They thought I was just furniture, something to be discarded when they were ready to move on to better things. They were wrong about everything except one thing. I'm not the same man Linda married. That man was trusting and naive, willing to accept whatever scraps of affection were thrown his way. The man I became understands that respect isn't given freely. It's earned, and sometimes it has to be taken. Linda was right about something else, too. I did enjoy watching them face the consequences of their actions. I enjoyed watching their arrogance crumble when they realized their victim wasn't as helpless as they'd assumed. I enjoyed the look of shock on their faces when they discovered that quiet, boring Robert Fox had teeth after all. Most of all, I enjoyed the moment when they realized that their biggest mistake wasn't getting caught. It was underestimating the man they'd betrayed.